My name is Sherry Hale, 28 years old. The smell of roasted turkey wrapped itself around the dining room, warm and rich, but somehow the warmth stopped short of reaching the far end of the table, my end, where I sat with the same quiet acceptance I'd carried for years. It was always the seat closest to the kitchen door, the one no one chose unless they had no choice. Tonight was no different. Across the long, gleaming mahogany table, my sister Rachel sparkled like she was the headliner of the evening. Her engagement ring caught the chandelier light every time she flicked her hand, an unnecessary gesture, but one she'd perfected. She lived for that reflected glow. So the wedding venue is finally confirmed. Rachel announced, her voice bright and smooth like she had practiced it in the mirror. She leaned into her fiancé Marcus with the confidence of a woman who already believed the world belonged to her. The Peninsula. They had a cancellation and we jumped on it. Aunt Linda gasped loudly, her hand flying to her chest like she'd been waiting for this moment all evening. Rachel, that's incredible. How did you manage that? Rachel offered a modest smile, one that somehow still managed to feel smug. When you're a senior marketing director at a Fortune 500 company, you make connections. Her eyes drifted toward me, her smile sharpened into a blade. Some of us work hard to build real careers. She didn't say it out loud, but the words hung there buzzing like a neon sign. I took another bite of mashed potatoes. They were good. Mom always used real butter and cream cheese. Small comforts. Marcus squeezed Rachel's hand proudly. I just made partner, actually, at 29. That's our Rachel, Dad said, raising his wine glass. Always been the ambitious one. The one who made something of herself. I didn't have to look around to feel the weight of the implications settling on my shoulders like dust, familiar and unavoidable. I'd heard variations of it my entire life. The one who made something of herself. Not the other one. Not me. Jake passed the rolls, Mom said softly, too softly, as if speaking too loudly might crack the fragile surface of the evening. I handed the basket to my cousin Derek, who sat beside me in what I privately called the budget seating section of the table. Derek was in community college. I was a warehouse worker according to family lore. We were the participation trophies kept around to make the high achievers look shinier. So, Sherry Uncle Tom leaned forward. His voice dipped in that familiar blend of pity and curiosity. Still at that distribution center. What is it now? 3 years? 4, I replied. Well, he chuckled. Steady work is nothing to be ashamed of. Not everyone can be the CEO type. Rachel laughed, her crystalline giggle cutting through the room. Sherry's more of a show up, punch the clock, go home kind of guy. The world needs workers. Her tone wasn't cruel, it was worse. Casual, thoughtless, reflexive. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. Absolutely. Blue-collar jobs are important. If they only knew. My fork scraped lightly against my plate as I cut into my turkey, my heartbeat steady, even though part of me wanted to laugh, cry, and walk out all at once. They weren't wrong. I did go to the warehouse 3 or 4 times a week. I did work there, just not the way they thought. Mom tried smoothing it over as always. Sherry's always been the practical one. And I could hear her resignation. She had long ago stopped trying to defend me fully. She'd settled instead for a soft acknowledgement, a muted presence. Dad jumped in. Remember when he wanted to do that computer thing in college, we told him to get a real degree, something practical. I remembered all too well. I'd dreamed of studying computer science at Stanford. They refused, said it was a waste, told me to study business like Rachel. They'd always believed Rachel's path was the only valid one. So I'd gone my own way, quietly, relentlessly. Rachel's phone buzzed loudly against the table. She glanced down, expecting praise. Then her face froze, went pale, then flushed a furious red. What's wrong, honey? Marcus asked. There's a Forbes alert, she whispered. Mom perked up immediately. Did they publish something about your company? No, Rachel said slowly. It's not about my company. The entire table fell silent. Even the air seemed to pause. She turned her phone around. On the screen, Forbes 30. Under 30. Tech entrepreneur Sherry Hale revolutionizes global supply chain. With 4.2B valuation. A stillness fell heavy in the room. I could hear the soft hum of the refrigerator behind me. That's not Mom began. But she stopped. It must be another Sherry Hale, Dad said, his voice cracking. The picture, Rachel whispered. It's him. Her shaking thumb tapped the notification. The article loaded, and there I was, professional headshot taken 2 months ago at the Forbes shoot, standing in front of one of my distribution centers. The headline beneath it, From Warehouse Floor to Billionaire. How Sherry Hale built chain, sink in silence. Derek leaned toward her wide-eyed. Holly, Aunt Linda made a weak attempt to scold his language, but was too busy staring. Everyone's eyes were on me. Sherry. Dad's voice was thin. What is this? A Forbes article, I said simply. About you, Mom squeaked. About you having a company worth $4 billion. 4.2, I corrected softly, as of the Series C funding. Might be higher now. Rachel scrolled her hands, trembling, absorbing each line like a blow. You founded ChainSync 6 years ago, she choked out. 5.5, I said. Technically. Marcus sat up straighter. Lawyer instincts kicking in. We use ChainSync at our firm. We pay them. You pay me, I said gently. About $1.3 million annually. Uncle Tom made a strangled sound. You're a billionaire. On paper, I said. Most of it's tied up in the company. A stunned, echoing silence swallowed the entire room. Rachel's breathing hitched. But you work at a warehouse. I own 15 of them, I replied. 16th opens next month. My God, Mom whispered. Dad just stared at me, a man watching his worldview collapse in real time. From the other end of the table, Rachel's end, the golden light of her engagement ring, suddenly seemed much dimmer. No one spoke. No one moved. They were all waiting for me to explain. And for the first time in years, I wasn't sure I owed them anything at all. The silence in the dining room felt alive, stretching over us like a heavy, suffocating blanket. No one reached for their wine. No one breathed too loudly. For a moment, all I could hear was the slow, rhythmic ticking of the grandmother clock in the hallway, the same sound I'd grown up with, only now it marked the unmasking of 28 years of assumptions. Rachel was the first to move. Her thumb scrolled shakily eyes, darting across the article like she was reading a confession she never expected to see. It says, her voice wavered, it says you built ChainSync in your apartment while we thought you were working nights in retail. I watched her throat bob as she swallowed. It says you learn in supply chain logistics by working minimum wage at the Pacific Distribution Center, that you spent 20 months studying every role, that you bought it. She looked up at me, her eyes glassy. You bought a warehouse at 24. I didn't answer. Not yet. I simply let the truth fill the room like smoke. Marcus leaned forward, elbows on the table. This part here, he flicked his finger across the screen. First app sold for $8 million. Used it to fund the prototype. He blinked at me. You built a logistics platform used by 43 Fortune 500 companies. Yes. His eyebrows shot upward, including ours. Around us, chairs creaked as family members shifted back, straightening, breaths catching. They weren't just staring at me, they were recalculating, rewriting history, rewriting me. There must be some mistake, Dad finally choked out, but the disbelief in his voice sounded more like fear. Somebody tricked you, or used your name. It's him, Rachel whispered. The article has an interview clip. She tapped the embedded video. My own voice filled the dining room. Through her phone speakers, clean, confident, polished in a way they had never heard from me. People ask why I didn't tell my family about ChainSync video, me said, leaning against a forklift in one of my warehouses. The truth is, I tried, at first. My family sat frozen, all staring at the version of me they'd never imagined existed. Every time I mentioned the app, or the company Video Me continued, I got the same response. That's nice, honey. Or, when are you going to get a real job? Eventually, I stopped trying to explain. I figured the work would speak for itself. Mom's hand flew to her mouth. A soft, wounded sound escaped her. Dad looked like someone had kicked his legs out from under him. Video Me smiled calmly. Now, I suppose, it has. Rachel stopped the video abruptly, as if it physically hurt to hear another second. She stared at the black screen, her fingers trembling on the phone's edges. You told Forbes about us, she whispered. About how we treated you. They asked about my inspiration, I replied softly, so I told them the truth. A faint tremor ran through Dad's hands as he reached for his wine glass. He didn't drink, he just held it like it was the only stable thing in the room. Mom leaned forward, her voice cracking. Sherry, sweetheart, why didn't you tell us? When would I have told you, I asked gently. Between the jokes, between the times you called my work cute or temporary, between Dad saying I lacked ambition, or when Rachel introduced me at her engagement party as my brother who works in a warehouse. Rachel flinched like I'd slapped her. I didn't realize she began. You didn't ask, I said. That's the difference. Uncle Tom, who had been oddly quiet, finally found his voice. So, you're a billionaire. On paper, I repeated. Most of it's tied up in the company. But Forbes says he started. Forbes says a lot of things I cut in. Most of them true. Aunt Linda blinked rapidly like she couldn't process any of it. I told my neighbor last month you were thinking of applying for a supervisor position. Oh, dear God. That would be awkward, Derek muttered. Marcus rubbed his forehead. It's saying here ChainSync saved several major companies from bankruptcy. He scrolled further. Oh my God. My firm uses your platform for every supply chain transaction. He looked at me with a mix of awe and disbelief. Sherry, we pay you over $1 million a year. A discounted rate, I said casually. You signed early. Rachel made a choking sound. This is insane. This is my reality, I said simply. Her eyes snapped to mine. You let us believe you were failing. I let you believe what you wanted, I corrected. You never listened long enough to hear otherwise. Dad slammed his wine glass onto the table hard enough to make the silverware rattle. This is ridiculous. You could have told us. You should have. Should I? I asked quietly. After you told me I was wasting my life. After you told me to pick a real degree because computers were a dead end. After you said coding wasn't a career. His face flushed red. I only said that because I didn't want you to ruin your future. You didn't want me to choose a future you couldn't understand, I said calmly. There's a difference. Mom's voice trembled. We didn't know. We truly had no idea. That's the point, I said softly. You never had any idea, because you made sure not to see. Rachel stared at the tablecloth posture collapsed. I told everyone at work you were average. Her voice broke. I mocked you. You did, I agreed. You've always mocked me. There was no bitterness in my tone, just truth. Cold, crystallized truth. A tense, painful quiet spread again as they absorbed everything. The walls between us, built over decades, were suddenly visible. How long, Mom whispered. How long have you been successful? Since I was 19, I said. Mom's hand shook. 19. That's when my first app sold, I continued. For $8 million. Her breath hitched. Rachel gasped sharply. Dad stared mouth open. But you were living in that tiny apartment back then, Mom said. Yes, I replied. Because I was building the prototype for ChainSync. Every dollar mattered. Rachel lifted her eyes raw and red. Why didn't you tell me? You weren't listening, I said. Her jaw trembled. Would it have mattered? I held her gaze for a long moment. No. Her eyes filled with tears she tried to hide. Mom reached across the table, her fingers trembling. Sherry, all this time you were building something incredible, and we treated you like the disappointment I finished for her, like someone who didn't measure up. Dad opened his mouth, but no words came out. Aunt Linda whispered, We didn't see you. You saw the version you wanted, I said. Not the one that existed. Whether the words hurt them didn't matter. They were true. For the first time in my life, the entire table was silent because of me. Not because I was insignificant, but because I wasn't. The faint buzz of a phone vibrated across the table. Rachel glanced at the screen and went white again. Oh no. She swallowed hard. It's my boss, she whispered. The room froze. Everyone's eyes were on her. On us. On the moment everything changed. Rachel stared down at her vibrating phone as if it were a live grenade. Her thumb hovered above the screen, trembling, hesitant, terrified. For someone who thrived on corporate attention, she suddenly looked like a child caught doing something terribly wrong. Marcus leaned toward her, whispering, You should answer. You can't ignore your boss. I know that she snapped, but her voice cracked under the weight of humiliation. I need a second. Her phone buzzed again, and again. A relentless, insistent reminder that the outside world was already moving faster than she could process. Faster than any of them could process. Answer it, I said quietly. It's worse if you wait. She swallowed hard, rose to her feet with a wobble, and hurried toward the kitchen, whispering, Hello, Mr. Patterson. Yes, it's him. I didn't know. No, he never told us. Her voice trailed off into a thin, broken thread. The moment she disappeared around the corner, everyone else seemed to unfreeze at once. You should have told us earlier, Dad muttered, even though his voice shook. We could have prepared. Prepared for what I asked. My success. Your embarrassment or the shock of discovering your assumptions were wrong. Dad's nostrils flared. He wasn't used to being challenged, least of all by me. It's not about assumptions, he snapped. It's about family, honesty. I gave a quiet laugh, small and humorless. Honesty. You mean like when I told you I wanted to study computers, and you said I was chasing fantasies? Or when I said I had meetings in the city, and you accused me of lying? Or when I mentioned coding, and you said it wasn't a real job? Mom reached for my hand, her eyes wet. Sweetheart, we just didn't want you to get hurt. I met her gaze steadily. And did all your doubt protect me? Or did it just make you underestimate me so thoroughly that the truth feels like betrayal? Mom covered her mouth with shaking fingers. Aunt Linda turned to her husband, whispering, I told everyone he was working retail. Oh my God. Her voice dissolved. Uncle Tom looked like he'd swallowed a lemon. I need some air. He stood abruptly, chair screeching across the hardwood, and stepped out through the patio door into the cold evening air. I watched him go, his silhouette slumped, shoulders heavy, a man undone by the weight of everything he thought he knew. Inside, the tension thickened again. Marcus cleared his throat, scrolling furiously on his phone. There are at least 30 articles about you. Bloomberg Wall Street Journal. CNBC, Sherry. How is this the first time any of us are hearing this? Because none of you ever asked, I said simply. And when I tried to share pieces, small pieces, you dismissed them. Each dismissal chips away at willingness until eventually you stop trying. Mom wiped her eyes with her napkin. We didn't know. We didn't see you. You didn't want to, I corrected softly. It didn't fit the story you built around me. Marcus kept scrolling, his eyes widening by the second. It says here you've been advising several global corporations on supply chain optimization. You spoke at the Tech Innovators Conference last year. You were interviewed by Jim Cramer. He's funny off camera, I added. Marcus's jaw dropped. You know Jim Cramer? Professionally. He leaned back stunned. Derek nudged me. Dude, you're like Batman. Warehouse worker by day, billionaire tech genius by night. I smiled faintly. Not exactly. It's insane, he breathed. I mean, awesome, but insane. Dad rubbed his temples. I told everyone at the club you were doing inventory work, he muttered. I said my son counted boxes for a living. Well, I said calmly, I did count boxes. I just owned them. His face reddened, humiliation tightening every muscle in his shoulders. Steve Patterson was there, he muttered. He's going to think I lied. A bitter laugh almost escaped me. Dad, half the men at your club are my clients. The other half are trying to be. Dad stared at me like he was hearing a foreign language. Aunt Linda blinked rapidly. You talked to Jim Cramer. On television. Several times. Several, she echoed weakly. The patio door creaked. Uncle Tom stepped back inside the cold air, swirling around him. His face looked drained, like he'd gone outside, hoping reality would reset itself, only to find it waiting patiently for him when he returned. My neighbor, he croaked, voice hoarse. He saw the Forbes article, called me immediately, wanted to know if I was related to you. He swallowed visibly. I told him no, he whispered, ashamed. You can tell him yes next time, I said softly. I don't mind. He looked like he might cry. Before anyone could respond, Rachel reappeared from the kitchen. She looked pale, shaken, defeated. My boss wants me to set up a meeting with you, she said quietly. Dad perked up like he'd heard a business opportunity. For what? For a possible contract expansion. She swallowed. And maybe investing in Sherry's next funding round. We're not doing a Series D, I said gently. We don't need external funding anymore. Rachel swayed, gripping the edge of a chair. I told him I didn't know, she whispered, that I had no idea, that you never said anything. Her voice broke. He sounded disappointed, like I'd been lying. She lifted her eyes to mine. This is going to ruin me, isn't it? I studied her. Rachel, the golden child, the perfect one. The shining example had cracks running through her like shattered porcelain. Her reputation, her pride, her carefully crafted image had all collided violently with a reality she hadn't seen coming. You'll be fine, I said quietly, as long as you're honest. Her lip trembled. I wasn't. You weren't curious, I corrected. There's a difference. Her shoulders sagged. Suddenly, Marcus straightened in his chair. Wait this part here. He angled his phone at me. It says you're opening 3 facilities in Germany next year and expanding across the UK and France. Yes. My company's European division is falling apart, Rachel said softly. Our supply chain's a disaster. I could have asked you for help if I'd known. You didn't ask. She flinched. The room felt colder now, thinner, like every breath came with a price. Dad stared at me with a strange mix of awe and regret. Sherry, we should talk. Really talk. We are talking. You know what I mean, he pressed. We need to understand all this. Understand you. For the first time tonight, I felt something sharp coil in my chest. Now you want to understand. Mom's tears spilled over again. Please, sweetheart. We didn't know. We just didn't know. I believe you, I said softly, but the truth, not knowing, was easier for all of you. The words hung there, delicate and devastating. Then my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen. A name lit up. Harrison, lead investor. Excuse me, I said, rising. Dad blinked. Right now, business doesn't pause for Thanksgiving. I stepped outside, sliding the door shut behind me. The cold air met my face, grounding real. Hey, Harrison. Yeah, I saw the Forbes piece. No, I'm not worried about the family angle. It's accurate. A breath. Set up the Monday meetings. I'll be back in the city by then. Through the glass, I saw my family frozen, fearful, unraveling as they scrolled through the articles about me, learning about my life secondhand from the internet. Maybe that was fitting. They'd never asked me directly anyway. When I walked back inside, their expressions were different. Not just shocked, but calculating, fearful, and suddenly very, very interested. When I stepped back inside, the warmth of the dining room hit me again. But this time it felt different. Less like a family home and more like a negotiation chamber. Every pair of eyes shifted toward me with a new, uneasy hunger. The air was heavy with things unsaid, things, reconsidered things, suddenly valuable. For the first time all night, Dad stood as if greeting someone important, someone whose approval he suddenly needed. Sherry, he began carefully, voice low and measured. Why don't we sit and talk about everything? Really talk. I took my seat slowly, watching as the dynamic in the room rearranged itself subtly but unmistakably. The anxious glances, the hushed breathing, the way even Marcus straightened his posture like he was preparing for a boardroom pitch. Sure, I said. Let's talk. Mom exhaled shakily as if relieved I'd agreed, but she didn't understand. None of them did. Dad cleared his throat. Your company. This chain sync, I corrected softly. Yes, he said quickly. Chain sync. Well, your company is clearly impressive, and we're proud. Very proud. There was something brittle in his tone, like the words were forced through clenched teeth. And he continued, we didn't realize how big this is. We didn't realize how successful you are. You didn't want to, I said calmly. There's a difference. Dad stiffened, but he didn't argue. Aunt Linda leaned forward suddenly. Sherry, sweetheart, my friend. Patricia works for a nonprofit. Big operations, lots of supply chain issues. Do you think maybe you could take a look at their systems? I could put you in touch with her, Linda Uncle Tom hissed. What she whispered, eyes wide. I'm just asking. It would really help her. It's been 5 minutes, I said not unkindly. You're already trying to network through me. Her face flushed scarlet. She sank back into her chair. Marcus cleared his throat, trying to shift the mood. Look, I know this must be overwhelming for you too, Sherry. Everything coming out at once. But I have a question. Rachel shot him a sharp look, but he continued anyway. Our firm uses ChainSync for all cross-border transactions. But we've been struggling with our European supply chain for years. Marcus Rachel snapped. Don't! What he said, turning to her. It's business. No, she insisted quietly. It's opportunistic. Marcus hesitated, then leaned back for a moment, until he turned to me again. Well, if you ever want to discuss opportunities with us, we'd be happy to. No, Rachel said firmly, cutting him off. He stared at her, confused. But she didn't look at him. She looked at me. Not with calculation. With guilt. With something raw and unfamiliar. Sherry, she whispered, voice trembling. I owe you an apology. Everyone fell silent. I screwed up, she continued, hands twisted tightly in her lap. I've been awful to you for years. I thought your choices were stupid. I thought you were wasting your life. I thought you weren't trying. I thought... Her voice cracked. I thought you were beneath me. No one breathed. And the worst part is, she continued, if this article hadn't come out, I would have kept believing that. I would have kept treating you like you didn't matter. I would have kept... She stopped suddenly, swallowing hard. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm genuinely, sincerely sorry. The pain in her eyes was real, but so was the fear. The fear of consequences, professional, social, personal. The fear of facing who she had been versus who I had become. I believe you, I said quietly, and I accept your apology. She exhaled shakily, tears slipping down her cheeks. But Rachel, I added, meeting her eyes, the apology doesn't erase the truth. You didn't see me before because you didn't want to look. You saw someone to mock, not someone to understand. She nodded, closing her eyes as more tears fell. Mom sniffled loudly. Honey, she choked out, reaching for me again. Please understand everything we ever said, everything we did, was based on who you thought I was, I finished gently. Not who I actually was. Mom sobbed harder. Dad placed a stiff hand on her shoulder, looking down. Then he turned to me. His jaw was tight. His eyes glossy with something like humiliation and regret bundled together. Son, he began slowly. I should have supported you. I should have believed you. I should have trusted your choices. When you said you loved computers, I should have listened. I should have been proud. The words seemed to rip out of him, jagged and painful. I'm sorry, he whispered. A part of me felt a faint, fragile ache, an ache shaped like every birthday he'd dismissed, every dream he'd discouraged, every achievement he'd ignored before it was big enough to impress him. I appreciate you saying that, I replied softly. But Dad, this apology isn't for me. It's for you. Because you're the one living with the regret now. His face crumpled slightly. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. I was simply telling the truth he had avoided for years. Across the table, Aunt Linda's phone buzzed. She blanched and quickly silenced it. But she wasn't quick enough. The caller ID flashed. Patricia Nonprofit. I raised an eyebrow. She shrank in her chair. Uncle Tom cleared his throat awkwardly. Sherry, you know we've always cared about you. Deeply. I held his gaze. No, Uncle Tom. You cared about the version of me who made you feel better about your own life. He froze. No one spoke. The chandelier light flickered lightly, casting long shadows across the table shadows that twisted around each worried face, each trembling hand. Suddenly the room felt too small, too tight, too suffocating. I stood. Mom gasped. No, no, don't go. Please, sweetheart, don't leave like this. Dad stood too. We need to talk more. There's nothing left to talk about, I said calmly. Not right now. Sherry Mom reached out. I took her hand gently. I'm not angry, I whispered. I'm not storming out. I'm leaving because I can't sit here and watch all of you scramble to rewrite reality in real time. I looked around the table, meeting each pair of eyes. You're not processing who I am, I continued. You're processing what I'm worth. Silence. Cold, unbreakable silence. And until you can tell the difference, I said softly, there's nothing to fix. Rachel covered her mouth, sobbing silently. Marcus stared at his hands. Dad looked like he wanted to argue, but couldn't find a single word to defend himself with. Aunt Linda was pale. Uncle Tom looked hollow. I grabbed my jacket. Sherry Mom choked out. Please, stay. Eat dessert. Just stay. Mom, I said, voice softening. You can call me tomorrow, or the next day, or any day after that. But tonight, I need space. Rachel stood abruptly, tears streaming. Wait, Sherry. She stepped forward, trembling. I don't care about the money, she whispered. I swear, I want my brother. I paused. She wasn't lying, but she wasn't ready either. I'm still your brother, I said quietly, but we can't pretend nothing happened. She nodded, slowly breaking. I opened the door. The cold air swept in like a blessing. I'll talk to you all soon, I said, but not like this. And I walked out, stepping into the night where their expectations couldn't reach me anymore. The night air wrapped around me the moment I stepped outside, cool, open, quiet. A sharp contrast to the suffocating tension in the dining room I had just left behind. I stood on the porch for a moment, breathing in the stillness, letting it steady me. My chest felt tight, not from anger, but from something far more complicated. Exhaustion mixed with clarity, relief, laced with grief. Behind me through the window, I could still see their silhouettes frozen at the table, staring at the space I'd left behind. For years, I'd been the invisible one. Now, suddenly, I was the one they couldn't look away from. Funny how that works. I walked down the steps slowly, the wood creaking under my weight, familiar from years of family holidays and backyard gatherings. But tonight, every sound felt different, like I was hearing it from the outside for the first time. My car, the same 6-year-old Toyota, they thought defined my entire life, sat under the dim driveway light. I reached for the handle, then paused. Sherry. Rachel's voice cracked through the night like a whip. I turned. She was standing in the doorway, her figure backlit by the warm glow of the house. Her eyes were red, her breathing shaky, but she looked determined, more determined than I'd seen her in years. Please, she said, voice trembling as she stepped out onto the porch. Please don't leave like this. I said nothing. I wanted to hear what she chose to say without being guided. She took another step, then another. I know she whispered that staying would be unbearable. I made it unbearable, but please just hear me out. I leaned against the car door quietly. I'm listening. Rachel took a long breath, gathering every shred of courage she had left. I was awful to you, for years. I know that. And tonight, seeing that article, seeing everything you built without us, it wasn't the shock of your success that broke me. It was the realization that you did all of it alone because we pushed you away. Her voice cracked. I should have been there. I should have supported you. I should have been proud. Should have, I echoed softly. But you weren't. She nodded through a tear. I wasn't, and I'm so sorry. For a moment, the only sound was the whisper of the wind through the trees. I studied her face, the sincerity, the regret, the fear that she'd lost something she didn't realize she valued until it was too late. You always thought I wasn't trying, I finally said. But I was, just not in the way you respected. She pressed her lips together to keep them from trembling. I know that now. Do you? I asked gently. Or do you just see the number Forbes published? She closed her eyes and a tear rolled down her cheek. You know what I deserve that. She wiped her face roughly. But no, I'm not thinking about the money. I'm thinking about the nights you spent alone building something. The mornings you came to family events exhausted because you'd been working. The times you mentioned coding or meetings or projects, and I brushed you off like you were talking about something childish. She swallowed hard. I hurt you. I mocked you. I made you feel small because I needed to feel big. Her honesty hit harder than any insult ever had. I can't erase any of that, she whispered, but I'm asking, begging for a chance to do better, not because you're successful, but because you're my brother. The cold night seemed to pause, waiting. I took a slow breath. I believe you mean that, I said quietly, and that matters. But healing doesn't happen in one night. You hurt me for years. Tonight was just revealing what was always there. Rachel nodded, defeated but understanding. I know. I unlocked my car. We'll talk, I told her. Just not right now. She nodded again, wrapping her arms around herself against the cold. Okay. Her voice was barely a whisper. Okay. As she turned to go back inside, she hesitated. Sherry. Yeah. She looked at me with a small broken smile. I always thought I was the successful one, but after tonight, I finally see who you really are, and I'm proud of you. Honestly, I really am. I felt something warm, soft stir in my chest. A quiet, hesitant beginning of something that could become forgiveness someday. Thank you, I said. That means more than you know. She nodded once and walked back inside, her silhouette shrinking as the door slowly closed behind her. I got into my car, shutting the door gently. The interior was familiar, worn, comfortable. My world, my real one, existed far from the heavy expectations of that house. I started the engine. As I backed out of the driveway, the porch light flickered behind me. Through the front window, I saw my family still gathered around the table, but they weren't eating or talking. They were staring at their phones, reading articles about me, interviews with me, analyzing a life they'd been too blind to notice unfolding right in front of them. The headlights illuminated the road ahead as I drove away. The houses blurred into streaks of yellow and orange. The night grew darker, quieter. Then my phone buzzed. VP of Operations. The Forbes article is exploding. 2M shares. Press will be heavy Monday. Don't worry, we've got your back. I smiled, faintly thumb tapping out a reply. Ready for it. See you Monday at 6. Another message arrived seconds later. Lead engineer. Proud of you, boss. Ignore the noise at home. You built something real. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel, emotion rising like a tide I didn't expect. They saw me. They always had. They saw my work, my vision, my integrity. Everything my family had refused to see. Traffic lights flickered green ahead. The road opened wide. Another buzz. Unknown number. I frowned and answered. Hello, Mr. Hale. A familiar warm voice. This is Patricia Chin from Forbes. I exhaled a soft laugh. Hi, Patricia. Big night, huh? You have no idea. Your story's exploding. People are calling it the most compelling 30 under 30 piece in years. I'm glad it resonated. One question, she said. Now that your family knows, what happens next? I glanced at the empty passenger seat beside me, at the long stretch of road ahead, at the skyline slowly rising in the distance, the city where I'd built everything from the ground up. Nothing changes, I said, meaning every syllable. I get back to work, just like always. And your family? I thought of their faces, the shock, the guilt, the sudden recalculation, the cracks beneath years of assumptions. They'll figure themselves out, I said softly, just like I did. A pause. Then, that's a powerful line. May I quote it? You can, I replied. Enjoy your holiday, Mr. Hale. You too. I hung up. The city lights shimmered ahead, familiar and welcoming. Not glamorous, not loud, just steady like the life I'd built for myself. My life. Not the one my family boxed me into. Not the one they assumed I failed at. The one I carved out with cold sweat and stubborn belief. As I merged onto the highway, the hum of the engine and the glow of the dashboard felt like the truest kind of peace. Let them read the articles. Let them feel the shock. Let them rethink everything. Because tomorrow and the next day and every day after, I'd still be building. And this time, they'd have to catch up. The highway stretched ahead of me like a quiet promise, steady, predictable, indifferent to the chaos I had just left behind. The white lines blurred beneath my headlights, and with every passing mile, the weight on my shoulders loosened just a little. By the time the city's skyline rose fully into view, steel glass and soft golden lights, the knot in my chest finally began to unwind. The city didn't care who my family thought I was. It only cared about results, ideas, effort. It respected me in ways the dining room back home never had. My phone buzzed again. Another notification. More articles, more mentions, more shares. At any other time, it would have been business as usual. Tonight it felt different, harder, sharper, like every headline now carried an echo of that Thanksgiving. Forbes, the billionaire next door. How a family misjudged a visionary. Bloomberg, Sherry Hale, the hidden giant of global logistics. LinkedIn trending, chain sync, under 30. Under 30, Sherry Hale. A strange mix of pride and sadness swirled in my chest. I turned down the familiar industrial road toward the warehouse district, the place where everything had started. My loft was close, nestled inside a converted factory building I'd chosen deliberately raw, brick-wide windows, and the hum of machinery nearby. It felt honest, grounded, real. Just like the work. I pulled into the small gated lot and parked. The security lights washed the pavement in pale yellow. As I stepped out of the car, the silence of the district wrapped around me, not cold but calm. The sound of my footsteps echoed slightly as I walked toward the entrance. Inside the loft, the warm glow of the dimmed lights greeted me. Exposed beams overhead, sleek workstations. Against the wall shelves, lined with prototypes from early versions of the chain-sync platform. Some messy, some laughably crude, all sacred in their own way. Memories flickered through me. Nights coding until dawn. Frustrating bugs that refused to be solved. Tiny victories no one saw. Failures no one believed existed. Breakthroughs no one celebrated with me. I hung my jacket, exhaled slowly, and sat at my main desk. The monitor lit up with a soft blue glow. Unread messages pinged one after another. VP of Communications. All major outlets want follow-ups this week. Will screen requests. Head of European Expansion Germany build out on track. Need your approval on the updated timeline. Lead engineer AI optimization test successful. Numbers exceeded projections. And then, a message from Mom. My thumb hovered above it, hesitating. Mom. Honey, I don't know what to say. I'm sorry. I'm proud. I'm ashamed. I love you. Please come home tomorrow. We need to understand. I need to understand. I want to try. Love, Mom. A long, slow breath escaped me. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't enough. But it was a start. Then another message. Rachel, I was wrong. About everything. I don't deserve forgiveness yet. But I'm going to earn it. I promise. My chest tightened again, this time not with anger, but something softer and more fragile. I replied, We'll talk. Not tonight. I set the phone down gently and leaned back in my chair, staring at the glow of the monitor. The day had been exhausting in ways I never expected. Exposing. Liberating. Painful. Necessary. Then another buzz. Unknown number. Again. I frowned and answered, This is Sherry. A familiar voice responded, Sherry, it's Stephen Patterson. For a heartbeat, I didn't say anything. Dad's club buddy. Marcus's firm's CEO. The man Dad had tried to impress for years. Good evening, Mr. Patterson, I said evenly. I won't keep you long, he replied, tone respectful, almost cautious. I wanted to congratulate you personally. Your work is extraordinary. We've been using ChainSync for years, and I didn't know you were behind it. I'd like to schedule a meeting if possible. Of course, I said. Email my assistant. She'll coordinate. A pause. I also spoke to your father earlier, Patterson added delicately. He sounded surprised. I think he realizes now that he misjudged you. I let out a quiet exhale. He did. Well, Patterson said, I hope he also realizes he raised someone exceptional. My throat tightened unexpectedly. Thank you, I managed. After we hung up, I sat in silence for a long moment, letting the words settle, letting the night settle inside me. Then I opened my laptop. The ChainSync dashboard filled the screen analytics projections, real-time performance metrics from warehouses across the West Coast and beyond. The lines moved smoothly, cleanly, predictably. This was the world I understood, the world that made sense. My work, my creation, my identity, with or without family acknowledgement. As the minutes passed, my breathing steadied. The tension melted away, replaced by the quiet, familiar hum of focus, the same feeling I'd had the first night in my tiny apartment coding the first version of ChainSync. No applause, no audience, just purpose. Hours might have passed. I wasn't sure. But eventually, I leaned back and stared at the ceiling beams above me. What now? The question Patricia Chin had asked echoed in my mind. What happens next? Tomorrow, I would deal with the press, the investors, the expansion. Monday, I'd sit in meetings with teams who respected me long before Forbes did. In a month, I'd be on stage in Singapore delivering a keynote on innovation. And my family, they would have to start from the beginning. Not with my success, not with my money, but with me. Whether they chose to or not, that wasn't my burden anymore. My phone buzzed again. Lead investor Harrison, congratulations again. Rest tonight. We build tomorrow. I smiled faintly. Yes, that was the truth of it. Tomorrow we build. Just like always. I closed my laptop, stood, and walked to the wide loft window that overlooked the silent warehouse district. Rows of buildings, rows of lights, rows of opportunities waiting to be solved, optimized, improved. This was home. Not the dining room full of fragile egos and long-held misconceptions. Not the forced seat at the end of a table that was never meant for me. Not the boxed-in version of who they believed I was. Here, in this loft, in this city, in this work, I was exactly who I had fought to become. A man forged by doubt, driven by dismissal, powered by purpose. And tonight, for the first time in a long time, I felt free.